Hello, my name is Kristian Coates Ulrichsen, and I'm an advisor at Gulf State Analytics. I'm also a research fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy in Houston, and an associate fellow with the Middle East North Africa program at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House in London. And I'm here to talk about Qatar and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. Qatar's perspective on the JCPOA, ever since it was signed in July 2015, has been a framework to ensure that an issue as contentious as Iran's nuclear program is managed in a coordinated and cooperative manner, and in a way that minimizes any potential to cause regional insecurity or instability in the Gulf itself. And that's especially important for a country like Qatar, for whom there is no alternative ship entry point for all imports and exports that do go by ship through the Straits of Hormuz. And we saw the recent blockage of the Suez Canal, how quickly any disruption can have worldwide economic effects. And so from a Qatari or a Kuwaiti or a Bahraini point of view, those countries that have no alternative, there's a premium to be placed on anything that can minimize any potential for disruption. And the period of maximum pressure, maximum resistance between 2018 and 2020, the fact that there were several occasions when tensions spiked and there was a risk that we could see an escalation into conflict, those days did not help in terms of maintaining security and maintaining political and economic confidence across the region. So anything that can work to ensure that both Iran and the US return to compliance and that the JCPOA can go back to being a functioning agreement will be a net positive effect from a Qatari point of view. Qatar can play a diplomatic bridge between Iran and the US, so of course can Kuwait and Oman as well. In all three cases, Qatar, Kuwait and Oman, they are trusted partners of the US. They're potentially also trusted by Iran to exchange messages, to keep open indirect channels of communication and dialogue, and to at least ensure that so long as Iranian and US officials are not meeting in direct dialogue, that there are indirect ways in which the parties can at least have an open channel to communicate should there be misunderstandings, should there be points of tension over issues such as sequencing and timing of return to compliance, over any misunderstandings, over any recrimination should one party move and the other party not reciprocate. So I think there is a role to play from a Qatari point of view, with many others, with potentially the Swiss could play a similar role, the Norwegians, but it at least means there's a multitude of options for US and Iranian officials to have ways to smooth over any differences before they can get to a point where they can actually sit down in the same room and begin to negotiate. And we saw Qatar play that role, for example, with the Taliban, where at the beginning there were no direct contacts between US and Taliban officials, but the Qataris were playing the role of interlocutor, of mediator, of passing messages, as they did in 2014, for example, with the negotiations over the release of Bo Bergdahl. And over time, as the US and Taliban began to meet directly, the Qataris then hosted the direct meetings that resulted in an agreement in 2020, last February. So there could be scope for the Qataris and others to play a similar role to at least ensure that the US and Iran get to the point where they can begin to return to compliance and sit in the same room, and that any friction before that doesn't mean that process ends before it even begins. The signing of the al-Ula agreement in January 2021 that ended the Gulf Rift and lifted the blockade of Qatar could be important in the sense that it could make it easier for the GCC to develop a cohesive and consensual position that reflects all 6 member states, and potentially could ensure that the GCC could collectively represent its individual states should there ever be a position to move to a follow-on negotiation between Iran and the international community over other regional issues which will of course affect the Gulf states as neighbors of Iran. For better or for worse, they will have to live with Iran for good or for bad, and so there will be heavy pressure from the Gulf states and others in the region to ensure that they're represented at any follow-on negotiations. But should only one or two or three countries be represented, that could be a point of friction in and of itself with other countries that are not represented. So potentially, should there be a GCC collective representation, which might be more possible now that the rift is over, now that all 6 states can come together and begin to try and at least formulate a common position, that might at least help move forward should we get to that second stage of negotiations at any point. Now, of course, that won't be easy, but it's at least one potential less obstacle to that point. Well, thank you for listening. Please do follow Gulf State Analytics at their website and on Twitter at Gulf State Analyt. And do also follow me on Twitter at Dr_Ulrichsen. Thank you.